Let's get this show on the road. Hey, people, I hope you're doing well. Hope you're doing splendid. And we are back together as fight fans to celebrate this weekend's UFC Vancouver. Of course, this isn't the biggest card of the year. Obviously, this is a fight night in Vancouver. And the headlining fight was not the fight originally planned. Of course, we had Reinier de Ridder taking on originally Anthony Hernandez, who unfortunately got injured during his training camp. So Brendan Allen has stepped up to replace Fluffy Hernandez and is looking to cause an upset at UFC Vancouver and knock out the ever so solid, the ever so difficult RDR. Difficult in the sense that he is very dangerous for the midweight division. And we're going to see if Brendan Allen gets the job done. We're going to see if Brendan Allen does what Rob Whittaker was not able to do, what Bo Nickel was not able to do. We're going to see if RDR is the real deal. But of course, we know he is. So this fight should be a walk in the park for RDR. But we're going to have a look at the main card in a minute. But we're going to start off with the prelims fights to not miss out on. Let's get into it. So we have 7 fights on the prelim card, and we have quite a few names that are very important for this card and that I cannot wait to see come back in the UFC Octagon in Vancouver. So starting off this card, we have Melissa Croden. She'll be taking on Tainara Lisboa with a record of 7 victories to 3 defeats, whereas her opponent Melissa has a record of 6 victories to 2 defeats. To kick off this prelim card, we have a great women's bantamweight bout. Also returning to the Octagon, we have Asmat Bekoev with a record of 20 victories to 3 defeats, and he'll be taking on the mysterious Yusri Begari. These guys are going to be having it on the Octagon, and there is a huge reach advantage for Yusri, so I can't wait to see how that turns out in the Octagon. We also have Karl Prepolek coming back. Karl Prepolek, he'll be taking on Drew Dober. Drew Dober, of course, for me, an iconic fighter of the UFC and someone I'll always remember for his fight against Jean Silva, where he had the huge gash on his face and, of course, had to be stopped by the doctors. But Drew Dober is, of course, currently on a record of 27 victories, 15 defeats. He's a veteran. He's got amazing fight IQ. And he'll be taking on Prepolek, who has also got quite a big record of 18 victories to 9 defeats. And they'll probably put on a war at UFC Vancouver. I do not doubt there'll be blood and there'll be entertainment. And there may be a 50k bonus for 1 or 2 of these guys. In the flyweight division, we have Bruno Silva coming back to take on Park Young-sung. Bruno Silva has a record of 14 victories to 7 defeats. And Park has a record of 10 victories to 1 single defeat. So this will be a big challenge for Bruno Silva, taking on someone who has not really known what getting defeated is like. So this will be quite interesting to see. And in our ESPN featured prelim, we have Charles Jourdain in his home country of Canada taking on Davy Grant. Davy Grant has a record of 17 victories to 7 defeats, and Charles has a record of 16 victories to 8 defeats and 1 no contest. Of course, Charles Jourdain recently appeared on our screens on Dana White's Contender Series, accompanying his brother for his fight at Dana White's Contender Series, and he won, of course. So we're now getting both Jourdain brothers in the UFC. And I'm sure Charles Jourdain is very proud of his brother. He will want to put on a show in his home country to show out and introduce the UFC fans to who is Charles Jourdain, for those who don't know him. And of course, kick off this amazing main card. Let's get into the main card now. So let's get into my main card picks and breakdown. Of course, starting off with Matt Frevola. Matt Frevola, of course, coming off of a loss. And I remember exactly when this was because, of course, I was there at UFC Paris last year. So it's been a whole year and a bit since we've seen Matt Frevola in a UFC Octagon. And he unfortunately lost to Faraziem via knockout. And it was a nasty one at that. And he'd previously been knocked out the year beforehand by Benoit Saint-Denis. So he has taken quite some time off to recover. And he is back in the Octagon at UFC Vancouver, and he'll be taking on Carl Nelson. Carl Nelson also coming off of a KO loss. So both men, of course, looking to get back in that win column and show up and show off what they're capable of, and probably quite frustrated that they've not been winning in the last while. So this will be quite a nice fight to kick off the main card. Now, as for who's winning, let's get into the stats first. Matt Frevola, of course, has a record of 11 victories to 5 defeats and 1 no contest. Carl Nelson has a record of 16 victories, 6 defeats and 1 no contest. And we have similar statistics, of course. Both men are in the 34, 35 years old range. Carl Nelson, 34 years old, Matt Frevola, 35. Both men have a similar height. Carl Nelson just edging him a little bit on the height. And in terms of reach, they have exactly the same reach. Both men, of course, are strikers, and both men will be looking to stay on the feet for this one, I think. I'm going to go with Matt Frevola for my pick for this fight because whilst he's a striker, he does have great ground game. And I think that, unfortunately for Carl Nelson, his weakness is the ground. So if Matt Frevola plays his game right and does things correctly, he will be able to dominate Carl Nelson on the feet and on the ground and get maybe a submission or a TKO via ground and pound in the second or third round. That is my prediction for the first fight of the UFC Vancouver main card. Next up, we have Manon Fiorot, of course, La Française, coming back after her UD loss to Valentina Shevchenko. Of course, she challenged Valentina for the women's flyweight title and unfortunately missed out via UD. Didn't get knocked out, didn't get submitted, but didn't win that fight, so didn't claim the gold. Valentina, of course, the women's flyweight GOAT with so many emeralds on her belt now after all the title defenses she has accomplished. So Manon Fiorot, of course, was coming up against huge competition. She has now got a record of 12 victories to 2 defeats, so a very clean record still. And she'll be taking on Jasmine Jasudavicius with a record of 14 victories to 3 defeats. Of course, it's a big challenge for Manon, as is for Jasmine. Manon's 35, Jasmine is 36. We have a slight reach advantage for Jasmine, who has got 172 centimeter reach, and Manon has an 165 centimeter reach. But we're looking at two women with a similar height in this fight. So Manon, of course, coming off of a loss for a title challenge, is of course going to be looking to win this fight more than ever because she needs to prove herself that she is still worthy of a potential future title shot if Valentina is still the remaining champion. Of course, Valentina Shevchenko will soon be taking on Weili Zhang, who just recently relinquished her belt in the women's strawweight division to move up a weight class and challenge this weight class's champion, Valentina Shevchenko. So things may shift around in the women's flyweight division very soon, but until then, Manon Fiorot, of course, is going to be very hungry for that win, as is Jasmine Jasudavicius, because, of course, if Jasmine wins this fight, she'll be able to move up in the flyweight division's rankings. So this is a huge opportunity for Jasmine, more so than for Manon. Manon, this is more just for proving herself. Jasmine is more for securing a place in the top 3 in order to then challenge for the belt at some point. So different objectives, same motivations. As for the winner of this fight, I'm going to be sticking with Manon Fiorot. Manon Fiorot, I think, will win this fight via UD or via late stoppage in this fight. I think this fight will stay on the feet a bit. They'll get a bit tired in the second or third round. She may KO Jasmine Jasudavicius. I think most likely Manon Fiorot will get the UD in this fight over 3 rounds between these two flyweight contenders. Next up, we have Marlon, Chito, Vera. Of course, everyone's happy that Marlon's back because he's been away for some time. Of course, we've not seen him since he took on Figgy. I mean, that's saying something because he took on Figgy last August, so last August of 2024. And now we're in 2025 in October. We've not seen Chito in over a year. And of course, he lost his fight via UD to David Figueiredo, as well as his fight for the belt back in the day against Sean O'Malley, former champ in the bantamweight division. So this is going to be a big step up for Chito Vera because he's taking on someone who is potentially very dangerous for him. He's taking on Aiemann Zahabi. Aiemann Zahabi, who is 37 years old, so his only disadvantage, of course, is his age. But despite that, he was able to get a UD win over the legend Jose Aldo before, of course, he retired. His last fight was with Aiemann Zahabi. Aiemann Zahabi can say he almost retired Jose Aldo in a fight that was very contentious. People obviously saw Jose Aldo winning that fight, but the judges did not. Now we're looking at two people who are stand-up fighters. Marlon Vera has a record of 23 victories to 10 defeats and 1 no contest, whereas Zahabi has a record of 13 victories to 2 defeats. So this is a big step up for both guys in terms of their competition. Zahabi, of course, looking to get up in those rankings in the bantamweight division to potentially get a title shot before the end of his career. And of course, Marlon Chito Vera is, of course, looking to show out in Vancouver since he's not been in the UFC for quite some time. Statistically, these two men are the same height, but Marlon Vera has the reach advantage, 179 centimeters to 174 for Zahabi. Will that be an advantage for Marlon Vera? Of course, a great striker. I think so. I think this fight will not be a one and done for Zahabi. I think that Marlon Vera is very skilled. He's, of course, been in the octagon with the best of the best, and he's looking to revenge his loss to Figgy, I think, via UD, and do a spectacular performance in the octagon at UFC Vancouver. But I'm going to pick Marlon Vera for this win. I think that Zahabi is a great fighter, but I think this fight could go to the UD for Marlon Vera. But I think that Marlon Vera may get the submission win here, and I think this will happen in the second or third round. I think that Marlon Vera will get the win here. Let me know what you guys think for Chito's highly anticipated UFC return. Of course, he was supposed to return much earlier, but his fight with Mario Batista got cancelled. And then Mario, of course, went on to fighting the newly debuting Patchy Mix, who unfortunately didn't do well in the octagon with Mario Batista. And Mario Batista will now be soon taking on, next week, he'll be taking on Umar Nurmagomedov. So he's working his way up in the rankings. So Marlon Chito Vera needs to catch up. A year on the bench, he needs to catch up. And I think all that kept up frustration, not being able to fight in the UFC octagon, this will be his return fight, and I think Marlon Vera will show out and get the finish over Zahabi. Next up for the co-main event, we have the ever-present Kevin Holland, of course, with a record of 28 victories to 14 defeats, won no contest. He'll be taking on Mike Malott. Of course, Mike Malott looking to show out in his home country of Canada with a record of 12 victories to 2 defeats and 1 draw. Now, Mike Malott, of course, is definitely the smaller fighter in this fight. He is slightly smaller than Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland is often, especially in the welterweight division since he moved down, is often the taller fighter. He is, Kevin Holland, 32 years old. Mike Malott is 33 years old. So we've got similar stats here. And the only advantage that Kevin Holland has that is very important is, of course, the advantage that he has in terms of his reach. Kevin Holland has the reach advantage in this fight. He has a reach of 205 centimeters compared to Mike Malott's 185 centimeter reach. So this is probably where Mike Malott needs to work on getting that distance and getting those shots in, despite having someone who is probably going to be further away from you than you would like. So Kevin Holland could easily get the sub here, or could easily get the KO and probably come out of this fight unscathed if Mike Malott is not able to gauge that distance. So very concerning for Mike. However, I don't see Kevin Holland smooth sailing in this fight at all. I think this fight will be quite a war for him. I don't think that Mike Malott will be easy to beat. And I think Kevin Holland's already looking at the future now. He's saying to a lot of interviewers that he wants to fight in December, and he thinks the UFC will be open with that if he wins this fight on Saturday. As far as I'm concerned, if you're looking towards the next fight, even though you've not had this fight yet, you are looking past your opponent, unfortunately. So Mike Malott, he's not someone to be slept on, and he hasn't been finished by many fighters in the UFC. He's been finished by Neil Magny. He's only lost once in the UFC since debuting in 2022. So Mike Proper Malott is a submission artist who also KOs his opponents as well. I think that Mike Malott will get the victory here in his home country of Canada. I'm supporting Mike Malott. I think that with the unpredictability of Kevin Holland, you don't know what kind of Kevin you're going to get on the day of. That's for sure. But I think that Mike Malott has what it takes to take that Kevin down, and a long-limbed Kevin Holland with those long legs and those long arms can be a disadvantage as well for smaller opponents who are able to capitalize on that to get those chokes in, to get those arm bars, to get those triangle chokes. So I think that Mike Malott will get the finish over Kevin Holland in the second or third round. I think the first round will be smooth sailing. The first round will be calm and collected. They'll be trying to gauge that distance, especially Mike, and Mike will then be able to test Kevin Holland's ground game. Kevin Holland, of course, is not a bad grappler at all. He has submitted quite a few of his opponents in the past, but I think Mike Malott will dominate this fight and get the win in the second or third via finish. Let me know what you think of this co-main event, and who do you think that Kevin Holland will win on Saturday night to come back in less than 2 months to fight in December? Let me know. And for the main event, of course, the main event that we were waiting for until, of course, he got changed. No offense to Brendan Allen, of course. Brendan Allen, a great fighter who's coming in at last minute to challenge the fully equipped, fully ready RDR Reinier de Ridder. Now, RDR, of course, has a record of 21 victories to 2 defeats, and Brendan Allen has a record of 25 victories to 7 defeats. They both have huge records, great fight IQ, and a lot of experience in and out of the UFC. Especially Brendan Allen, of course, who has been in the UFC for far longer than Reinier de Ridder. Of course, Reinier de Ridder is on his 4th UFC bout, 4th finish, 4th victory. And his only 2 losses came to the same opponent that he faced in his last and final fights at ONE FC before coming and joining the UFC. So Reinier de Ridder is the boogeyman of the middleweight division, coming in and fighting some of the best in the middleweight division and winning his fights. Of course, Bo Nickel was the up-and-coming star in the UFC's middleweight division, and he completely annihilated Bo Nickel. Bo Nickel, of course, coming back very soon at MSG, but he hasn't been back since his last loss to Reinier de Ridder. So Reinier de Ridder put him on a bench. And he also, of course, Reinier de Ridder recently fought in Abu Dhabi against the Reaper, Rob Whittaker, and got that win via UD. He was dominating from start to finish. So being that he's the bigger fighter here, he has a slight height advantage over Brendan Allen. Reinier de Ridder is 35, Brendan is 29. So 29, I sometimes forget how young Brendan Allen is, but you know, he is 29 years old. So he's got a lot of improvement he can make and some time to do that. And I think that since we saw his last fight against Vettori, he has been making some big improvements. Does that mean he's going to beat Reinier de Ridder? I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that Brendan Allen won't be, as much people would expect him to be, the worst opponent for Reinier de Ridder in terms of skills. I think he'll be able to match some of his grappling. Brendan Allen is great on the ground. The reach advantage that Reinier de Ridder has is almost 10 centimeters in reach advantage. The height difference is very small, but of course Reinier de Ridder is a little bit bigger, a little bit taller. However, of course, you know I'm going to say that Reinier de Ridder is going to win this fight. I don't think that Brendan Allen has what it takes to beat someone of his level. Brendan Allen is not yet at the stage in his career, skills-wise and experience-wise, to beat Reinier de Ridder. I think this fight will go further than most expect. I don't think it will finish in the first or second round. I think this fight will end in the third or fourth. I think in the third or fourth round, Reinier de Ridder will KO Brendan Allen. I think that's what's going to happen. And I think Brendan Allen will, whilst being dominated on the feet, try and shoot for the takedown. Reinier de Ridder has great takedown defense. And even if Brendan Allen is able to take him down, Brendan Allen will not be able to stay on the ground in control of RDR. RDR will be able to get himself out there. So it'll be a lot of back and forth. There'll be a lot of level changes until, of course, we have the third or fourth round come around. They get a little tired. And I think that's when Brendan Allen will start being a little bit more lackluster and let those jabs land a little bit more from Reinier de Ridder, and Reinier will get that TKO finish over Brendan Allen. That's my opinion. Let me know what you guys think of this fight card. Are you guys excited still, even though it's not the original main card fight? Of course, now the question is this going to be a number one contenders fight? I do not think so. Of course, the UFC, their definition of number one contenders fights changes all the time, and I think great finishes and beautiful performances make for number one contender spots. So if this fight is still for the UFC a kind of number one contender spot, then Reinier de Ridder, of course, if he gets that finish over Brendan Allen, he'll of course solidify his place as a next contender for Khamzat Chimaev and the UFC's middleweight belt. However, the fight between Nasruddin Imavov and Caio Borralho at UFC Paris was supposed to be also a number one contenders fight. However, there wasn't a finish in that fight. So Nasruddin, even though he put on a good show and he won via UD, that wasn't enough, I think, for the UFC to guarantee his title shot. So everything is a bit up in the air for the middleweight division. But let me know what you guys think of this fight. Do you think RDR, if he is able to finish Brendan Allen as I predicted, will he get a title shot next? Or do you think he needs to face someone like Fluffy or someone else in order to secure his place as number one contender for Khamzat Chimaev? And do you think that Brendan Allen could scrape the victory here? Are you team Brendan Allen or are you team RDR? Let me know in the comments down below. And we'll see each other next week for a new episode of my podcast. And of course, my picks for UFC 321 Silgan versus the champion of the heavyweight division, Mr. Tom Aspinall. See you guys then and have a nice weekend. Bye.